Hello, I'm Kat Pennington and my presentation today is called The Pursuit of Persistent Consistency in Your English Curriculum and Why That's Really Important. So before I get too far into the presentation, I'm just going to get rid of me and my little Mrs. Bubblehead because there's quite a few slides that I want you to be able to see without me getting in the way. Okay, so without further ado, let's just think about what do I mean by English curriculum. So when I'm talking about consistency in your English curriculum, I mean your reading curriculum, your writing curriculum, and many schools now have an oracy curriculum. Some schools have the oracy curriculum woven in through the reading and writing, but ultimately when I talk about English curriculum, I'm talking about your reading and your writing curriculum. So why is it important? Why do we need as leaders to be persistently consistent in our reading, writing and our English curriculums? Well, first of all, learning is cumulative. Well, the best learning that happens is cumulative. So unit by unit, year by year, phase by phase, children's learning builds. And whoever has designed the reading curriculum or your writing curriculum will have thought carefully about what goes where to ensure that learning key concepts, key elements are consistently revisited, recalled, built upon. So if somebody decides to go rogue or miss a particular element or unit out, that will cause a gap in the fluidity of the learning. So it's really important that we're persistently consistent because learning builds on learning. Learning is cumulative. And what we know, if things are building, then we're also building children's schemas. They're interconnected web of items of knowledge. And the more we know, the bigger we grow. As Hirsch says, knowledge begets knowledge. So we need to ensure that our curriculum is designed so it builds, it's cumulative. And what I'm talking about is persistent consistency, not prescription. We don't want teachers all teaching in exactly the same way. We're not all robots. But what we're talking about is teachers and the school community adhering to your agreed implementation methodology, because that's identity defining. We should be able to walk into a school and see and understand the way in which their reading curriculum is taught and why it's taught in that way. Every member of staff should be able to tell you, we do this because, we teach it in this way because it becomes what you do, it becomes part of your school's identity. So what do we need to be persistently consistent in? Well, in order to create sustainable improvement, there are three key areas I believe that we need to be persistently consistent in. And that's the practices, culture, and systems. And the leadership and management will oversee that. So we need to be persistently consistent in our intent and our implementation. And within that, the practices, system, and culture. So first of all, let's just look at this intent. And it's really important, in order to be persistently consistent, that as the leader, you own the intent. Absolutely, you're going to collaborate with others and you'll be working with others to create the intent. But ultimately, you've got to own it because you need to know your marbles. You need to be the cement that is going to enable that intent to be delivered. You're the overseer of the whole thing. So never lose sight of having that ownership. As I said, you will collaborate with others. They've got to own it too, but you're the overseer of it as well. So what do I mean by these marbles? Now I want you to imagine that your English, your reading and your writing curriculum is a glass jar, and into that glass jar you're going to put marbles, and those marbles represent key units of knowledge. So as a leader, you need to decide what knowledge marbles are you going to put in there? Why those marbles? And if you imagine that every child is holding a glass jar, what will be the marbles in their jar? Why those marbles? Why are they important for that child in your school? So knowing your marbles, knowing what marbles you want in that glass jar will ultimately define your English curriculum. And you'll be able to lead with intentionality because you know why you've chosen those things for your reading and your writing curriculum. I often call it the bus ticket. Do you know by the end of early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, across the primary phase, what's your children's learning destination? Where as a reader will they get to by the end of those phases, by the end of their time with you? What's their bus ticket? What is their pathway? And ultimately then you become the cement of that pathway. You're going to be making sure none of those rocks and stones get loose or crack. You are the cement in ensuring that pathway is secure towards their bus ticket, towards their writing destination. So you've got to know your marbles, you've got to be the cement, you've got to own the intent so then you can be persistently consistent with it. And that intent will then drive the systems that you need. So in order to create sustainable improvement, you've got to be persistently consistent in your systems in order to get that intent. So be consistent around the plans and overviews. Create the systems so you know who teaches what, where, when, and ultimately you know why. Make sure the timetables are in place. The dedicated time is given. If you want the class story being read, if you want phonics every day, if you want writing every day, we need to make sure those timetables are there and are rigorous and people teach within them. And you also need to ensure that the systems for finding out what's working and what not working is in place, because that will influence and guide improvement work. So thinking about the overviews you might want to put in place for your reading and your writing curriculum, is there a whole school overview that really shows that cumulative learning? Drilling down into that from the whole school overview, you would have year group overviews. Drilling down even further, you would then have medium-term plans. And drilling down even further, you might have weekly plans and or timetables of when these things will be taught. But as a leader, you're going to have a real handle on that whole school overview and know it well. Then we need to think about that implementation. How is your intention taught? How are we going to ensure what you want your children to learn, those marbles that you've decided to put into your glass jar, how will your teachers teach those? And why will you teach like that? Does everybody teach with intentionality? And as Alex Quigley says, our intent of our curriculum will only go as far as the professional development in place to support its implementation. So you've made this decision and worked with teachers on the intent. Now we need to work on developing their practice within it. Because in order to improve our education, we need to improve how we educate. So can everybody answer why are they teaching what they are teaching in the way they're teaching it? And do we all have that agreed implementation and we work hard to be persistently consistent in it and develop teachers' practices? And then we need to think about those two essential questions for any leader. What's working and how do you know? So we need to consider carefully our monitoring. First of all, what do we monitor? What needs to be monitored and why would you want to monitor that? But almost more importantly, how will you monitor it? How will you actually find out if the thing you're looking at is working, having an impact? And from that monitoring, we need time to reflect and evaluate, because that reflection and evaluation should always lead to some sort of action, some sort of improvement. But I've got a little red cross there because often that's the bit that's missed out. We monitor and we spend time reflecting and evaluating, but we don't always spend time working on the actions that result in what we've monitored and reflected on. So make sure your monitoring leads to evaluation and good reflection, but that leads to action. And you don't just spend time monitoring and evaluating, because you'll get stuck in a little bit of a rut there. So we need to be persistently consistent in measuring our impact, consistently asking what's working, how do we know, and then engaging in tight monitoring, careful reflection, which leads to action. But how we monitor can be key. And of course, with any change can create a little bit of a storm. So as you're being persistently consistent and maybe implementing things for the first time, you may experience what I call the storm. But from the storm, people will then begin to form. And you want to pursue through the storm so that your intent begins to form. From the forming, it'll eventually become the norm. It becomes what you do here. And the more you do the norm, eventually it will be performing. So it's important that you go through the storm to the forming, to the norming, to the performing stage. Because honestly, behind every storm cloud, there is a blue sky. So as a leader, we need to be persistently consistent on your intent and its implementation. With every problem comes an opportunity. And COVID has presented us with a fair few problems. But with tight curriculums, it will be easy for us to monitor and assess what's been missed. But equally, it is also a good time to maybe look at things with fresh eyes and start again if we need to. But ultimately be patient, because good things come to those that persist. And doing anything around curriculum takes time, years, to be able to do it and do it well. So be patient and persist. Be persistently consistent. And I hope that's helped you. And you've got some ideas on why it's important to be persistently consistent in the delivering of your English curriculum. Thank you.